Hi guys and welcome to the stream. As usual, we are going to train our opening understanding in the Queen's Gambit declined, and therefore we are going to solve some puzzles here. We are always going to play the black pieces, and here you can see the first position. What would you play in this position here? It is black to move. So here the answer is pretty simple. We need to understand something, and that's not too difficult. The thing we need to understand here is that the queen here, let's make it red, is actually in a pin. So, or targeted in a pin. So here you can see the e4 pawn is pinned. This means it doesn't really defend the d5 pawn. Why is that? Because in this very example, the queen is not defended, the queen on c2. So therefore we just take with our knight, the opponent's knight takes, and now comes the tactic. Queen takes d5, and now we take the queen on c2 back, and we are up a minor piece. So now let's go to the next puzzle. So where do we go here? Continue. Again, black to move. Take your time and try to find the right move here. Again, it's about undefended pieces. So what we can see here is the bishop on g2 is undefended, but our bishop on b7 is also undefended. So in the event of, say, knight takes f4, we might run into, well, let's make it red, bishop takes b7, and then also the rook on a8 is hanging. So this is not working, but we have a discovery attack. Why? There's again the queen involved, the queen on d1, and if the queen is targeted, we will just win the bishop on g2, therefore knight takes c3, and now the queen is just lost in this variation. Yeah, it's knight takes c3, and again black is winning. What if this knight was taken? Well, then very simple, bishop takes g2, the bishop of white is lost, and black is winning the game. So now to our third example here. Again, black to move, try to find the right move here. In this example, also make sure to understand which sort of moves are not working here. And so bishop e takes c4, that looks good, but it's not really working because there's this intermediate check on f6, so why a black is not winning anything. One has to realize that the queen here is overloaded, but knight takes f6 is always a resource for white, which is very unpleasant. So therefore, we have another idea. This bishop here on e6 is defended by the queen. The queen here is defending, so the queen on c2, the white queen is defending e4 and c4. So therefore, we just take on e4. So knight takes e4, and now if the bishop takes on e6, we take with the queen on e6, and now our queen is guarding the knight. If queen takes e4, then we see the queen was overloaded because bishop c4 is winning a piece. If we play it the other way around, we just get a very bad pawn structure here, because knight f6 is an intermediate check, and we must react to the check. And then white captures the bishop on c4. Black isn't up anything, but actually is dealing with some weaknesses on the king side due to the ruined pawn structure. Next puzzle, it is black's turn here again. Try to find the right move here. Here you need to think more about a silent move in the middle of the combination. Or silent. It's still threatening, but it's rather silent. So the first thing that came to my mind was just taking here. This looks incredibly good. And then queen h3 is an idea with rook h6, but this is rather slow. Therefore, what if we just change the order? So rook takes on g4, h takes g4, queen h3, and now we are threatening bishop takes. This also looks very good. However, in this variation, when the rook takes, the pawn takes, the queen goes here, there might be f3 ideas. So this is not 100% clear to me. What do you guys think? What to play here? So I'm still a little bit undecided. Like this, I would make the bishop trade and play safe. Yeah, but we want to win, and it's not so clear. Oops, sorry. This was no. What's happening here? Sorry. Let me just remove this. So bishop takes, pawn takes, queen here. Yeah, and this looks very promising. The king is sort of trapped. Yeah, this looks like the right moves. And f3 in this event is also not working, because then simply queen takes g3 check. The king must go to h1 and then checkmate here. So let's go for this. And here the puzzle is already over. There is simply no way for a white of escaping, because the queen is covering this square. So here simply rook h6, and white is completely lost. Let's go. Before we go to the next example, let's review something here. So here rook takes. I believe that this might be something, but maybe f3 is saving. Yeah, I believe it's f3. But also bishop e5 looks not so pleasant. And in the end, here f3. And now one can just sacrifice the exchange, and the bishop is defending. On g3, this wouldn't have worked. So therefore we took with the bishop. Oh, here again black to move. This is a simple puzzle. Here we have to decide between two different moves. It is black to move. We have two different or three different moves, but we have basically two moves, which we will take a look at. So one variation is a knight takes f2 check, but then the rook takes, and it might look like a backrank mate, but there is just rook to f1 and the bishop on c4 is guarding that rook. So we must take on d1 and then fork on f2. And now we were a piece down and suddenly we are just up the exchange and completely winning, and additionally also a pawn. Now let's go to our next puzzle. Again, black to move. And this one looks a little bit messy. So what shall we play here? What would you guys play here? Rook h8. Then I'm curious if the king could escape through g3. That looks like something. So check, king g3, check, and after checking here there is g4, and it looks like white is escaping. So rook h8 is not the move we are searching, but a move that is also preventing king g3, and this is just queen h4 check. Now the king is trapped. There's absolutely no way of saving the king here. It's going to be a mate, and the opponent, the white player, can't do anything here because now rook h8. We are threatening this and this. So g3 wouldn't work either, because here simply a mate here, or the very cute mate in 2 here using this pin. Still a mate. Okay, so this here, it's very important to realize one thing. The king would love to go to g3, so rook h8 check, king g3, and the king is escaping. You don't want to allow the king to escape, otherwise we are just in a very unpleasant spot, being a piece down. Therefore, queen h4 check, king must go back, and rook h8. Let's go to our next puzzle. Again, it is black to move. Try to find the best move for black. First sort out the weakness in the position, and then the answer becomes very clear. So the weakness here is the knight on c3 and the check on c3. It's defended by the pawn and by the queen. And here we see an issue. We might put a bishop on g7 and pressure c3. The queen has no square to go from where it would defend the knight. Therefore, this bishop g7 is too strong and white is already lost. Here in the puzzle, white just sacrificed the queen. If the queen goes anywhere, sorry, then bishop takes c3, it's a check, and black just won a piece because taking back is obviously very, very bad. King has to move, or knight d2 or queen d2, whatever, and the rook on a1 is falling. So here the issue was the skewer. The queen cannot really move away here. Let's go to our next puzzle. Again, black to move. What would you play here and why? What should the black player do here in order to win this game? So what to do here? Okay, since nobody is trying to answer it, I will tell you the solution. You have to recognize that the knight here is undefended on h4, and that the rook on c1 is defending the knight on c3, and only the rook. So knight takes c3, the rook recaptures, and now a discovery attack. Knight to d5, and we get the knight on h4. So again, first capture on c3, the rook captures, then knight to d5, attacks the rook and attacks this bishop. So whatever white moves, we just capture the free piece. If the knight goes back, we just get the rook. This is also horrible. White is obviously lost here. He's an entire rook down. This is not working. And in the puzzle, after rook c2, there's bishop takes h4, and again, here we are just a minor piece up, completely winning again. So now let's go to our next puzzle. Queen takes b7, and again, black to move. What should black do here? And this one is very simple. Here you just need to try to capture the queen. Which rook to b8? That's the question. Which rook do we put on b8? Yeah, rook f to b8. So we take the f rook and trap the queen. The queen cannot move anywhere because all these squares were covered. Here, 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 and also here. So not the a rook, otherwise white would escape through the a file, which would be very unpleasant. We want to win the queen, not let it escape. Very important. One thing that is generally very important when you're trying to trap the queen, make sure you have covered all these squares. Because if the queen can escape, very often you just end up with a huge material disadvantage. Maybe not so huge, but still, being a pawn down is not pleasant. Being 2 pawns down is very often already catastrophic. So make sure to trap the queen if you go for it. Now let's go to our next puzzle. Black to move again. What should black do here? And here it looks like there is not much we can do. What are we supposed to do here? You're welcome. Thanks for the insight. So here, what to do with black? I will give you a hint. Remember the principle of two weaknesses or double attacks. If you have this in mind, you will find the solution here. So where are the weaknesses? F2 is a weakness and B2 is a weakness. So the answer is obviously Queen F6, attacking both. And here, white decided to cover the F2 square by, or protecting it by interposing. So we just get the rook on A1. And we are winning here. So again, here Queen F6, attacking both pawns. And this is very, very devastating for the white player. White cannot really defend the weaknesses here. Next puzzle, black to move. What shall we play here? Again, try to figure out the weakness. Where is the weakness of white? Where is black supposed to take? So this bishop on g5 is attacked twice, but it is also defended twice. Yep, so d5 takes e4 because of the bishop takes. Now we take with our bishop, because our bishop here on b7 is currently hanging. We don't want to sacrifice it. We take here, and then we take the bishop on g5. And if the knight took, then simply queen takes, and we are up material. So here an interesting variation is also bishop takes e7 instead of bishop takes e4. This was in the answer, but we want to investigate what happens after this. Well, very simple, the queen takes, and now this pawn is defended twice. It's attacked twice. Now let's make this red, green. And there's also a fork here. Therefore, black is completely winning. Let's go to our next puzzle. Again, it is black to move, and black would love to fork here on c2. However, knight and queen are covering it. But at the same time, we should see that the queen is protecting the knight on d4. So simply queen takes d4, queen takes d4, now knight to c2. And the problem is that the queen on d4, the white queen now, is undefended. And therefore, black simply wins material by taking d4. Now let's go to our next puzzle. Again, black to move. And again, you are supposed to try to figure out the best move here. And this one looks a little bit tricky, but actually it is not. So what should black play here? Queen takes the rook on a1, okay, but what if bishop c3 is played then? Doesn't this trap the rook, the queen, sorry? Doesn't this trap the queen? exactly, the knight on b1 is also hanging, and that's a major issue of the white player. But knight to c3 is possible, and here we see the queen is very comfortably escaping. Just queen b7, queen b2, and then queen b6 check. If knight b5, in order to make sure that the queen cannot go to b6, then we just go back along this diagonal and save our queen. And we are completely winning again. Black to move in this example, try to find the best move here. And this one looks really tricky, if you ask me. Black is in check, so we must do something. We must do something. What should black play here? So here we see if we take on f7, the queen would just recapture, and there's not really a way to do anything. So we should increase the pressure here, because our pawn is also attacking the opponent's queen. If we play king g7, the problem is king g7. Sorry. The problem is that the knight just takes here. So this is not really working, but there are other moves. And the right answer here obviously is rook takes e3 check, if we were not in check, right? If we were not in check, then rook takes e3 would be the answer. However, this is not working here. So we must think of something different. This is simply not working for the moment. So king and queen are forked. Try to find the best move here. And again, this position is about capturing the queen. The queen is really trapped. We just take on f7, then comes rook f8. The queen has no square left. Then it captures on f8, and we take the queen, and we are very happy. Knight takes d5 by white. Again, it is black to move here. What should black play here? No, there is no way to lose both rooks. We just gain knight and queen for 2 rooks. That's a very good trade. It's 10 points for 12 or 13 points. Depends on how you evaluate the queen, either 9 or 10 points. So here, this position is, it looks more difficult than it actually is. What white is threatening to some degree is this double check. If white double checks by playing knight f6, then black is in big trouble. However, there is a simple trick. We see that the g-pawn is defending our knight on f6. So if we capture the queen on b3, we remove the defender of the d5 knight. So you might think, okay, but he will just take on f6, and this is true, but we just recapture with the g-pawn, and then this knight on e5 is under attack. And keep in mind, white hasn't recaptured the queen, has to recapture the queen on b3. So queen takes b3, knight takes f6, and now very important, g takes f6, Now they recapture our queen and we take on e5 because our pawn had just captured on f6. A very important idea here. Takes, and we take back on f6. Hi Max, nice to see you again. Here it is, again black to move. Try to find the best move here. And again, this one is very simple, just focus on the forcing moves. Then you will find the right sequence. Now, here we see the bishop. And before we continue, I want to mention a concept that is very, very important. It was popularized by John Nunn. And John Nunn, a very strong British grandmaster, a top 10 player in his prime, once made this term popular, LPDO, lost pieces drop off. And with lost pieces, pieces are meant that are maximally as often defended as attacked. And here we see this bishop on c4 is once defended by the queen and once attacked. So this would already be classified as a lost piece, and it's very, very dangerous. So here we simply check, sorry, let's remove the arrows. We simply check on b4, and if the queen takes, we take back with bishop and it's check. The king has to move, and we take on c4 because the queen apparently was the defender of the bishop on c4. However, if we check and the king just walks away in any direction without the queen taking on b4, we can just take on c4 anyway, yeah, with bishop or with queen. Both should work. Yeah. Queen b4 check. Now the queen takes. And you see why it is so important to keep, or just keep in mind that pieces that are as often defended as attacked might invite or be the reason why tactical combinations are working. So here the other variation was check, the king moves anywhere, and we can capture on c4 either with queen or with bishop. Both moves should be working here because knight takes e6 captures a piece that is defended twice by the f-pawn and by the queen. We could also just capture here with check and then on e6. Just to show you that here really it seems like black is winning in every variation, and this position is very, very unpleasant. Right when he... Thank you. Yeah. So make sure that pieces that are not defended and not attacked cannot really be attacked. Otherwise, make sure that you just don't put them on these squares if your opponent might come up with some dangerous threats, obviously. But here, this concept is more about being conscious about it. So just keep in mind that it might be an issue if your pieces are not defended as often. Here we see again a very strange appearing position, and it looks like a very simple tactics here. Here we see again pieces that are as often defended as attacked. The bishop on a3, 0 times defended, 0 times attacked. So let's just add an attacker here. The king has to move, and we get the free piece. Another case of lost pieces drop off. But by no means am I propagating that you should keep your pieces defended at all the times. Of course, there are moments when you need to take a risk or play for something, and then it's absolutely fine if you have checked that your opponent cannot come up with some threats. Then feel free to play your move, obviously. And this one, also very simple. Here, queen and battery are forming a nice... queen and bishop are forming a nice battery. What we also see is a queen on the very important square c7. queen c7 in these queen's gambit lines is very normal. And we also see a double attack and a fork in form of a fork. Knight a5 attacks bishop and queen, and the problem is the queen on c7 suddenly appears in the game and black is completely winning here. There's no intermediate check because well, there is, but the rook just takes. So it's simply not working. This is what I meant. Next puzzle. This one is very nice. Here we see, actually, this is very similar to our first puzzle, if you recall it. Can we switch back to it? Yeah, here. We saw that the queen is unprotected on c2 and the e-pawn is pinned. So knight takes, queen takes, and we just win here. Because the queen on c2 is unprotected. And now it... Oops, sorry. Did we just lose the puzzle? Yep. Sorry. Well, the point was that we could have checked on a5 with our queen, and then the queen on e5 was just hanging, because he had just recaptured here and we had the pawn on f6. Okay, but now, unfortunately, we have another position. Here we see the queen is defended once and attacked 0 times, so the queen might not appear as a lost piece for now. However, the king has no square to go around the queen, or is very limited, especially because if we remove our bishop from d4, our queen on d8 comes to life. So here we can play this very nice move, bishop takes f2 check, and then the king has to take. There's no other legal move for white, and we can just gain the queen for a queen and pawn for a bishop. And this is very unpleasant. For the white player, white is utterly lost. Actually, this game lasted only 8 moves. So it started d4, d5, c4, c5. Oh, I think this is called the Vienna Gambit, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, d takes c5, e5. Interesting move. e3. Yeah, very strange moves. This looks like a blitz game. Bishop takes c5. Knight c3, d4. Bishop takes. Okay, yeah. The opponent just laid a trap and white fell, or just run into it. So let's go to our next puzzle. Rook takes. Whoa, rook takes f6 check. This looks very, very wild. It's black to move. Try to find the right move here. And again, it doesn't seem to be too complicated. It's a check. What if our bishop just takes? It's also defending the queen, and then we just win material, right? So bishop takes f6, queen takes d1, bishop takes d1, bishop takes d8, bishop takes d8, and we just have a rook for a bishop. Yeah, okay, he takes with the bishop on f6, then obviously queen takes f6, and we are winning because, very important, there is no rook to f1. Very, very important. Here it is again black to move, and again we see a position that is familiar to us, very familiar to us. We had it with the queen on c2, at least in a very similar manner. We just take on e4, it's forking, it's a double attack on a bishop and knight, and if the bishop takes on e7, then queen takes e7, and now this pawn, which is forking the two pieces, is defended by the queen. Obviously, bishop takes e4 is also not working because of bishop g5. The bishop on g5 is attacked twice, defended once, so this is not working. Another great example of lost pieces drop off. D takes e4. And The bishop on g5 doesn't appear to be very stable, if you ask me. Here it is black to move, and we have again a very strange looking position, and it is black's turn. What should black play here? Queen takes pawn, queen takes, you mean queen takes a5 check. What do we gain if we play that move? It's a check, okay. The king has to move either to e2 or d1, and then maybe simply rook d8 if the king runs to d1. Yeah, this looks very, very unpleasant. So yeah, this appears to be very strong. Okay, they defend this way, queen to d2, and now we have a nice little trick. The rook on a1 is undefended, therefore we have bishop b4. The queen takes, and now we can just take with our queen, and if he takes back, we win the rook. So let's just go back and make sure you understand this tactics. Here queen takes a5, and then we have bishop b4, a very strong idea. Is this clear to everybody? So let's go to the next one. Here we just lost our queen with black. It is black to move. And we are also attacking the opponents. Queen. The question is, what is the best way? Is it just knight takes d1? Rook takes... rook takes d1 is not working. And also king takes d1 is not working. So these moves are out of question. And if we take on b2, we are threatening this very unpleasant check. What if we just take... They play this. Then we take here. And we have a very nice position. So takes, rook takes, and now comes the issue. Bishop b5 check. Bishop b4 check. Now either knight d2 or rook d2. Knight d2, then the bishop is on pre. The alternative was rook to d2. And then we just take king or knight takes, and then the bishop is gone again. So also this was fairly simple, I believe. If you know the idea. If you don't know the idea, it's not so simple, obviously. But this is also one of the reasons why you should solve a lot of tactical puzzles. Because tactics is so important. You either win or lose most of the games due to tactics, regardless of the level. Unless you are a top player, then we can talk about things like evaluation and opening preparation, but here it's just simple pattern recognition. Do you recommend the woodpecker method to study puzzles? I have students who use the woodpecker and who are successful. I have a couple of students who used that and were pretty successful, but I have also students who used other books and were very successful. With the woodpecker, I generally don't like that some patterns are just repeating all the time, like bishop sacrifices on f7 and h7. It looks like every third puzzle involves something like that. I like some puzzles to some degree, but what I really like is the second volume of the woodpecker, the positional one. But when it comes to tactics, my recommendation is the book by John Spillman, which I have linked in the pinned comment. It's a great book to get an intro into various tactical ideas. I really liked that book. I came across it a few weeks ago when a student of mine just showed it to me, and I think it's brilliant. I don't see a reason why not to start with that one. So when it comes to puzzles, I follow a little bit a different approach. What I do is I solve puzzles, and whenever I come across a puzzle that I cannot solve, it takes me a longer time, then I learn it by heart. So I don't do the classical woodpecker where I just go through puzzles 100 times. I try to learn them by heart to improve the database which I have in my mind about, which contains puzzles. Because one thing is being able to solve something very fast, and another is to understand something very deeply. And I believe in order to understand something very deeply, you either repeat it until your brain just shouts it out, and you need little time, but then the risk is that you miss some details. So I'm a fan of just taking my time and learning the puzzles really well. Different people have different approaches, and my favorite one is just learning a position by heart that I cannot solve or not solve in a specific time. Yeah, this is my take on this. Okay, I always take me during the review. Yeah, I mean, what do you mean with review? Is it the chess.com review function? Or is it something else? Because chess.com's review function is offering you exactly 0. If you want to improve in chess by reviewing your games, you must do it on your own. You must find your mistakes. You must work on your mistakes. Yeah, so no, I didn't renew my subscription to chess.com because I don't see the value of these things, and I believe it's detrimental to your development if you use the review function instead of thinking on your own. Okay, enough talk. Now let's go to the puzzle, the last puzzle, and then we will end the stream for today. Yeah, it helps you to show where you were wrong, but you can also just go through it on your own, annotate your game on your own on a sheet of paper or on the PC, and in the very end go through it with the engine and check if the things you wrote were correct. This is how you are improving a lot. And I believe the engine should be something we are using as the very last tool. Nothing that we should just throw in for fun. And I'm reading a very good book, How to Study Chess on Your Own by Davorin Kuliasevich. And what he's mentioning is, it's a metaphor. And it's, imagine you're in the car and you have the choice. It's either you or the engine driving. If the engine is driving, you are in trouble because you are not going to improve. If you are driving, the engine is just next to you, and from time to time, if you need it, it's a very useful tool that can help you. And I really like this metaphor. So keep or imagine the engine is something that is there and it might be useful to you, but don't use it too much. And now to our puzzle. So you say knight takes f2, but this looks like it's blundering the queen, right? Our queen is hanging. The queen on e7 is hanging. What to do here? Yeah, the queen is very important here. So, things that come to one's mind. Difficult. This queen. is attacking here. Our knight is not doing anything. What if we take on d6? Am I missing something? Am I missing anything? I believe it's taking on d6, no? Yeah, c takes d6. Okay, knight here. Looks dangerous. But okay, what shall we do? I believe we are forced to do this, yeah? And they take back. And still, we don't have a check or anything, I believe. So why not just take on d6? And also, the queen appears to be a weak piece then. On the same file as the king. Yeah, bishop takes, and now we're just winning. We won. What did we win? Okay, the queen looks exposed. We are threatening this. And it looks just horribly bad for our opponent. Yeah, defending doesn't really work, is it? Yeah, no, this pawn is too weak. Okay, guys, thank you for joining the live stream and staying with me until the end. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did so, I would love to welcome you next week, same time, Monday, 9:30 p.m. Central European Time or 3:30 Eastern Time, Eastern Standard Time. And see you next week. Bye.